You're going to have to replay that, Kelly.
I know, right?
Okay.
That's okay. I'll give people a synopsis. Hi, everybody. We just turned the recording on. For those of you who weren't here in person before the recording, great information was shared. We just did a lot of nonsense. But then I said to everybody, I have the stack of cards with question starters. And Kelly said, pick the sixth one, which is this one right here. How to best support families with tech support and training.
Sweet.
That's like a legit topic.
You've done your job.
That's what I like to call planning. There you go. All right, so we can have that as our beginning conversation. It doesn't matter how. I already scared away Kelly, like she left. Wow. All right. Well, that didn't take long. That was impressive. So thoughts. There you go. I didn't scare her away. I felt like she was hardier stock than that. It wouldn't have scared her away.
My dog is barking, so I panicked.
So I panicked and shut my video off.
Yes. That's all I could think to do was just shut down.
All right. So how about this? What are things we've been doing to support families, both tech support and training things? And then maybe we'll follow up with what are some opportunities to do that even better as we move forward going into the next year. So how have you been supporting families?
So I have to jump right in and say that my very first thing that I am thrilled about because of, the pandemic is that I have now done so many Zoom trainings with parents who would have had a really hard time coming in anyway and felt bad about it. And because of Mike Murata, shameless plug, creating Google Sites to send to the families that have the resources in them, and then you can just reuse them again and again for families. So that's been helpful. But I'm grateful for the tech part of it because they're comfortable getting on Zoom and having a one-to-one chat instead of the way it used to be, which that would have been like pulling teeth. So
yeah, both from the tech part of it and the positive, I think, of some of this pandemic stuff was that people have recognized they don't have to be in the same spot in order to participate anymore. Yeah. And so you get parents that are more, people can carve 15 minutes out. They can carve out a half hour. Yes. That kind of works. But, you think about the idea of having to come into school and it's like a 3-hour process to do that. And now we can just kind of find these little moments whenever. I think that's awesome, Rachel. That's great. And multiplying your efforts so you don't have to do that same thing over and over again.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. Tutorials and everything else. Cool. What else? What else is the other people doing?
Yeah, I think to piggyback off what Rachel just said is the open webinars. So I think we've probably had more families attend our webinars now just because they're out there. And so that has helped tremendously. A lot of more parents reaching out and attending the webinars.
Which and the things that come off of those webinars, like I can tell what parent has attended whose webinar based upon what they either start asking me or they start doing on their own. It's kind of been interesting to see the carryover.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I like that people are starting to make these connections with these different ideas and principles of things and starting to see how they're interconnected and understanding a little bit deeper some of the process of what we do. There's nothing better than having a family. Just it was the beginning of last week. They were on spring break and a parent asked if she could touch base with me. And I said, sure. She said, and her whole reason was to explain to me how she got it now. And I said,
awesome.
She goes, I got it. Nice. I get it now. I get what you're doing. I get what you're pushing. Pushing seemed like a harsh word, but I know what she meant. I get what you're pushing. I understand now the process piece. Because she was, if I was to look back at my interactions with her over the past couple of years, she was very tool driven. Tell me the next thing. There's got to be something new. There's got to be something better. And I would always say that's not necessarily true. There doesn't have to be something better. Maybe you're at the better right now. Maybe this is the thing. And I kept saying to her over and over again, for your son, this is the thing right now. He's being successful. It's all working out. Why don't we just smile and just chat about something else? And so now she finally gets it, which is good. And I'm happy about that. And part of that's because she's attending a lot of things too, going off what Kelly said. not just things that I'm doing, but just things that are out there. And she's like, oh, well, I'm home and this kind of works at my lunchtime. And I watched a webinar and I did this. I'm like, oh, she's really much deeper in the kind of exploring technology on her own, which is awesome.
That is awesome.
Isn't that the same path that we see a lot of people who come into AT make, where they're very tool driven, and then they see that if you don't work on implementation, none of those tools get used.
Right. And none of it really matters, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's exciting to see that it's really not that much different. It's really not different at all, whether it's a practitioner or a parent or any other stakeholder in this process. It's all the same thing. They all have that same trajectory, which is great. I think it's been good because, and I'm sure you guys can appreciate this. I'm not a big fan of the 30 tools in 60 minutes kind of approach to things. I don't really like that. I guess maybe there's a time for that. I guess I'd be hard pressed to find that time, but I get it. I get why people want that. But I would always love every time I'm at something and they have one of those 30 tools in 60 minutes, I always feel like the monkey wrench that it is in the works. And I always want to say right at the end, after they've run through the 29 tools and we're at the 58-minute mark and we're just about done, I always want to raise my hand and say just to the group, now what? Now what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Great. You got 30 tools. Awesome. How is that changing what you do for the students you work with? And
I think so, kind of going like the opposite of what you're saying earlier. You were working with a parent who was really well-versed in technology and was on it. But I feel like now parents who were very insecure about the technology are more confident with it now, just because we have done that. And that tool thing, that is the implementation part, is the biggest thing, because when we're having all those, I get a lot of questions like, well, that didn't work. That didn't work for the student. It's because everything was so pushed that stepping back and actually teaching that skill was the part that was missing. So we can have 30 tools in 60 minutes, but like you were starting to say, Mike, that implementation piece is a big thing, and just teaching that skill. Like I had a meeting this morning, and what can we try with the students? So I was giving some things to consider, but I'm always like, but there's going to be a lot of frustrations if we don't take that time up front to teach those skills and don't start by doing something that's high stakes, some preferred activities. But it does makes people pause when, we kind of take that time.
Yeah. And for some people, that time feels, if it's not explained well, and I'm just as guilty as anybody else of this, poor explanation in the beginning. We don't explain how critical that time is. People see that as wasted time.
Yes.
And like nothing's happening because I haven't gotten an app or I haven't gotten something else. And there's always this weird kind of trade-off of, all right, well, maybe I'll just give you the thing at the same time as I start the talk, just so that you feel like you got something. But then I'm just going to bury you in the, that implementation piece and that service part, because that's so important. And it's not as flashy. It's 10 times more critical, but it's not as flashy to people. Mm-hmm. People still like stuff. I got a thing. Look at this. I got a thing finally.
Yeah. Thinking out loud that would be a really great, like quick webinar, like 15 or 20 minutes, just talking about that piece with no tools. So then you're going to have people show up who are only going to be hearing that part and not really anticipating all of these tools. So if you could think of a catchy title, to have people hop in on there, talk about that implementation and how to implement and the why behind it. And you're going to spend a lot, more time up front. But if you have a student who, like, let's just say with a reading disability, who's constantly trying to get out of class because they struggle with reading and don't want to be in class. And then, then we're dealing with that behavior so much of the time, and really talking about how those behaviors are going to subside when that student has that tool that they need to use if they're taught correctly. I don't know where I'm going with that. I just probably created myself more work, but I like the idea.
You did. I like the idea. I think that for that to work, the title has to be so flashy.
Oh, I got flash.
People in, because they're going to feel bait and switched, right?
Yeah.
They're going to feel like, oh, I signed up for this assistive tech or this whatever webinar that I'm going to learn about these tools. And then wait, I'm not learning about the tools. And so there has to be some kind of.
How about like no tool webinar?
Well, I'm not signing up for that. No, I actually would. I would actually, because I love those kind of conversations.
It could be a mystery webinar, mystery sign up
webinar. Because
I would sign up for a mystery webinar.
Exactly. You could flat out say, it says right in the title, it's a mystery. You didn't know. I didn't know. It's whatever happens, happens. I like that actually. Choose your own adventure, and all adventures lead back to talking about service. Right. Not a single tool in it. I like it. I think that's good too.
How about we could play on the words where it says like no shirts, no socks, no service. We could, no socks. I said no socks, no shirt. What is that saying?
Don Johnson is like, no way. They're like, what do you mean no socks?
Yeah, it could be, no socks. No, okay. No tools, no something, just service. Or play on
writing these down.
Play on that.
I see where you're going. I'm liking it. I'm ready to support it. I'm all about it. I think it's great.
I don't know.
All right, you got to sit and think about that. You're gonna have a brainstorm at some point. You're gonna be like,
it'll happen.
Yeah, but it is that right kind of idea. I think when you do longer things with both parents and adults, like kind of like a series of things, I think people are a little bit more accepting of letting you go on the service tangent, right? And that's, I always call it the service tangent. I'm like, I know you want to hear about stuff, but give me 15 minutes to set the stage a little bit. And I think they're willing to give you that that flexibility of their time. But it's such a shame when people don't recognize the value of that service piece. And yeah,
you see
structured instruction.
Say what?
Or structured instruction. And one of the students that I work one-on-one with has several people that are virtual instructors to this student. And in one of the groups, it's a large group of students. And so there are activities that particular online educator does that keeps, like 12 students online going. And then when we get, and there are like games like spinners and all kinds of stuff. And then when I get to my one-on-one session, the parent wants to do those kinds of things. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? We're like going to dig and actually teach. And not that they're not learning in those games and activities, but it's not where, like, I don't need that to do those kinds of things when I just have a kid one-on-one. And so they get distracted by that kind of stuff. And you're like, you know what? The reason I'm using, and so it's that getting back to explaining the reason that we're going in this order with phonemic awareness is because it's not just I picked these letters from the sky.
Yeah.
I'm actually following a protocol. I'm following research. And I think people are starting to understand those pieces that they didn't see before. When their kids came to physical face-to-face school, they didn't all see what were the curricula that we followed. And then they got into online. And so they started seeing the tricks, but the curricula and the tricks at some point have to come together.
Right. Exactly. So what you're saying is it can't all be tricks at some point.
It can't all just be tricks, because then you're just going, then it's just edutainment, right?
Yes, exactly.
Ooh, I like that word.
Edutainment. I love that.
That is a word from the 80s, Kelly.
It is
just as valuable.
When we first started getting, the good old floppy disk programs. Is this edutainment? Is this instructional?
Ooh, I love.
And there's nothing, edutainment has a place.
Mm-hmm.
Does have
but
a place.
It can't be all of my instruction with a kid. It just doesn't work that way.
I like how you caught yourself. You said it has a place. You were about to say it can't, but then you were like,
oh, no. I do believe it has a place. Like, I recommend sites for people to go to, but I don't want to be using my hour of time with a student doing things that they can be, chasing bunnies, eating 5 carrots. They could do that on their time, right? Because it doesn't take an instructor to get you to like find the bunny with 2 carrots and the bunny with 3, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I think if you think about a lot of like webinars and learning experiences that happen, they do have a lot of there's opportunities in that for the entertainment part a bit, because right, you're trying to keep somebody engaged for that whole entire time they're there. But having parents involved in some of this virtual learning has given them the exposure of it's not all games and fun, right? It's not.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. I think of like all this PD. I've done more PD for myself in this last year than the last 15, right? And I'm exhausted in those sessions where it's one trick after another trick. It's like they have to use everything that they've ever seen.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, where's your content?
Right.
But I mean, I want a few things to keep me interested, but I don't want the whole hour to be like crazy. Let's go to this mentee, and then let's go to this thing, and then let's go to this. And like, unless that's what the topic is, right?
Yeah, right. And I realize we're about to transition to something else because it's funny. This is right in my mind too right now, because we got all of our reviews from ATIA from all of our sessions, and there was a lot this year. And I think that was a component of people had to fill that out in order to get to that certificate. So suddenly you got a lot of info, which was great. It was great, mostly great. But it was interesting where people were at, and still we have to remember, and I'm as guilty as this as anybody else, the mentee and the this and the that and the Jamboard and go out to do that. And I think part of that is because that's the way I like to move around things, and maybe it's my short attention span. And I like that. I'm saying in the nicest possible way to myself. It's Monday. I got to be nice to myself. I got to be with myself all week. And so I think part of that is the way I like to do things. But then I recognize that there are still people that are not super comfortable with the 2-screen experience.
Yeah.
And the jump into something else. But then there is this weird kind of struggle of, I don't want to be that one that just talks at you for an hour.
Right.
Right. And so there's this, how do I engage you? I think the chat does a really nice job of that in most of these kind of webinars now. I think that that's really powerful. Just the chat, and if nothing else, just asking people to put their thoughts there.
Yes, CSUN did not have an open chat, and I missed it. After seeing how active the chat was during ATIA, to not have it all at CSUN was really sad.
Do you find
that's so hard?
Do you think that turns you off to a learning event now?
Oh, whether they have the chat going or not?
Yeah, whether they have some opportunity to be heard. I'm going to leave it as broad as that. Not the chat, but how about that?
Sometimes you don't know till you get there. Like I've jumped in a webinar and there's no chat and I just feel suffocated. There's so much that could be missed. You're just like, right.
Right. And I'm thinking the same thing. I was in a meeting 2 weeks ago and I was all set for the meeting because I knew what the topic was. And I was excited to talk to people about it and ask a few questions. Like I actually had questions written down so I didn't forget. I was like, oh, this is cool. I'll drop them in the chat. Maybe the moderator or the presenter will speak to it, or maybe someone else will. Either way, maybe I'll get something. And I opened up the link and it was to a Zoom webinar meeting with no opportunity for me to do anything but raise my hand. And I'm not sure why. There was no other way to do anything once I raised my hand. And I sat there for like 10 minutes and I realized this wasn't going to work and I hung up. I just left. And I was like, that's just not the kind of learning I was looking for right now. And I guess it depends on the learner, obviously, but yeah, I just found that kind of a bummer. I think in all of these opportunities, whether it's for parents or professionals or whatever it might be, I'm constantly thinking about how to make this somewhat interactive, right? How to make it so your voice can be heard, in whatever form you want. That doesn't mean everybody has to be on the camera, but they're the chat. Enjoy's in the chat, and I see Irene in the chat, and I think that's awesome. I think it's perfect because everybody has an opportunity to participate in some way, whatever works for them.
Yeah, like I'm already stealing Irene's idea. I'm glad she's putting stuff in the chat.
Yeah.
It's not called stealing. What's it called?
Reuse.
Borrowing.
I was going to call it creative acquisition of someone else's idea. Because I just thought that sounded really fancy.
Expanding.
Yeah. But Irene, that is a great point. Irene says in the chat, part of teaching the implementation is teaching the philosophy or the why behind AT or AAC. It's the rationale for, how we got there.
You know, I have been very guilty because I'm really big about the why. So if I do an hour webinar, and like Kelly said, like you hit the nail on the head, like some people just want to show everything that they've known. And I've been guilty because I'm like, oh, I can't cut that out.
Yeah.
I can't cut that out. So I spend the first 20 minutes talking about the why and implementation and, you know, the whatever's happening before the tools. And then I'm rushing through like an auctioneer toward the end because I personally have struggled with taking some of that out, which I'm taking it out now, but that's definitely a true struggle because you think, oh, but if they had this and they had this, when really we should break it down to part 1, part 2, part 3, maybe 4, 5.
Yeah, I always frame that in a presentation as let's set some foundational information first, so we're all in the same spot, so that you understand where I'm coming from, and hopefully you recognize what I'm about to drop on top of that as foundational. But I think it's really important to lay that foundation.
So I think that what I'm hearing you say, and my brain is kind of going crazy with this, is that idea of the flipped PD, you know, where you actually send the tools out beforehand, and then you tell people to play. And then when they show up to your professional development, your whole point is application, when to use it, you know, hitting all of the UDL parts of it as well.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, when Scott was at Milwaukee Public Schools, as they were getting ready to roll tools out district wide, they would have like drop-in Wednesday. And then so after school Wednesday, the teachers would come and they knew that they would leave there with a copy of whatever it was or a download of whatever it was. And in the process of them teaching teachers to use the tools, they were also giving examples of how that was getting implemented for other students across the district. So they kind of trapped them, come and get it. And then they gave the whys while they were doing the training.
Yeah.
And that was like 30, 45-minute sessions.
Yeah, which is still good. I mean, they're still leaving with something, but they're leaving with some rationale for the something.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Also, Kelly and Jenna and I used to do a mystery bag, you know, where we would actually bring in tools and just put them out for people to explore without any explanation of what they were. And then after they got a chance to play and look at them and all of the different things, we asked them to tell us how they would use them, what they would, you know, what it might be used for. And sometimes they didn't know, but sometimes they came up with things that we hadn't thought about, you know, when it came to that exploration of that extra level of why. One of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Mike, it's like that activity you used to do at ATACP.
Yeah,
where in the environmental control area.
Yeah, it's just go off and explore. I mean, I think there is some value in that, but I think, don't you sometimes feel like you have to set that up with people though? Because I've gotten this feedback from participants. And of course, as always, it's the one voice that was the dissent that I've locked into, and now I'm laser focused on that one. But you know, I think if you don't set that up, you run the risk of that one person who says, I came here to hear from you, not from everyone else. And you know, my argument to that would be, but everyone else is the person you should be hearing from. All of us.
I think that you should spring it like an ATAC and then silently moonwalk out of the room before anyone criticize you.
Yeah, all of that sounded great. I mean, as you know, I am nothing if I'm not moonwalking out of a room. I think that's awesome. Yeah, I think that is pretty cool. I just did that the other day on Monday last week with my my master's class that I'm teaching. Is that we did a technology lab, and I set it up for them. I've been setting it up for weeks, just kind of laying the foundation of it. Like, hey, I'm going to come up with a list of things and you are all going to explore them. And we're going to come back together to talk about them. And then you'll have another opportunity to go back out. Maybe you'll go out to that same tool again, or maybe you'll go to something else. But I want you to learn. I'm not going to show you everything. I'm not going to run through every feature of everything. I want you to go explore. And I realized that was probably the better way to do that with that group, because setting it up over 2 weeks before that, put them in the mindset of, oh, wait, he's really just going to open up breakout rooms and just let us go. He's not going to tell us anything. You know, and I asked them, are there tools that you wish you had time to explore? We'll add them to the list. And we just made a really nice running list. And I said, you know, all right, here's 7 breakout rooms. I named the room for the tool. Go get them. Even if you're just sitting there and you're each working independently, but then you can look up and interact with someone else. It's a really powerful way to learn.
Yeah. I think sometimes some people need to know like your overarching topic.
Yeah.
Before they go into that. When I worked at UW-Milwaukee in the AT Outcomes Lab, and I was teaching the AT class in OT, they knew that we were going to work on rate enhancements.
Mm-hmm.
So they had, you know, things that they previewed before they came to the lab. And then the lab was just completely set up with things that were rate enhancers for them to openly explore.
Right.
And then you would find what things some people knew and they would teach other people. I always like having people teach others.
Yeah.
And getting them into that mode. And that worked out really nicely.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it gives you that nice opportunity. And, you know, and as I set it up for them in that Explorer, as you know, each of you has an opportunity to show what you know to everyone else. It doesn't have to be me, because I put things on the list and I told them flat out, I don't even know what this does. I know of it, but I have no idea. So, and I put it out there and said, if you guys have questions, I'm willing to talk to you and explore, but I'm not going to know the answer because I don't know this tool. And they all got a chance to kind of share that out at the end. And it was fun. And it was a little disheartening when we were talking about it afterwards, where someone had said, you know, this is our last class in our master's program, and we've never done something like this before.
Oh yeah.
And I thought, that's such a bummer. That bums me out. Like I was like, yeah, this went well. We filled the time. We were here the whole time. We were all engaged and we were having fun and we were doing stuff and we were popping in and out of rooms and everything was moving along. And then everybody goes, they say goodbye and everybody leaves except for this one person's like, this is great because I've never done this before. And I'm like, oh, all right, cool. Thanks, I guess. But it just kind of stinks a little bit that they don't get that experience.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm such a bummer. Jeez. Did we
All right, card number 2.
Card number 2. Oh my God, this is the greatest one. Again, the deck does not fail us.
You better be marking these cards.
I'm putting them in a different pile. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm putting them in a different pile. Card number 2, how to get buy-in from reluctant educators, faculty, and staff
Boom.
on AT. I mean, we could talk about this till next Friday if you wanted to. I mean, we could just keep talking.
It's not my job, folks.
Yeah.
Welcome to my life.
I have a slide. I just put it in a presentation that I'm working up right now. And I love using this picture. It's like an old timey advertisement. And it's a guy and he goes, no, thanks, I'm good. And that's what I use every time for this. And so, all right, so how do we do that? How do you get buy-in?
Pandemic.
Buy-in's been forced, right? And Joy says, find one teacher who gets it and encourage her to spread the word. Yeah. Right?
I mean, that's actually what got done to me. I was using stuff with kids in my early intervention classroom, and the special ed coordinator started sending me to other teachers' classrooms and then to other buildings. I used to work for Easter Seals, and they would send me to other counties, and it ended up creating a job.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what he was very smart that way. And he did it for people with different things. Like if somebody was really good with feeding and somebody was really good with something else, he really spread the wealth that way.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to do it. Right. You know, I was and Joy in our chat mentioned this, and Joy's in my other group that we did a coaching session the other day about my favorite coaching book. My everyday instructional coaching book, which I love this book. And we were talking about how to bring people in. And you know, one of the things, I'm trying to find the actual page of now, of course, now probably not the way to go. In collaboration is bringing in the devil's advocate, the person who is not bought in, bringing them in and encouraging them to share their rationale of why something won't work. And then, because then when they actually see the value of it, it's that much sweeter. It's that you're like, oh, I've convinced that person. And now they, in turn, might become your biggest advocate. They could turn from your mortal enemy to your biggest advocate just by having those conversations and bringing them into the discussion about why you're doing things. Like Irene says in the chat, back to the why. Why are we doing that? I think those are really powerful. What else? How do we get buy-in? What else do people have?
I've had this issue because I have a team that has a classroom where half the kids are virtual now and half the kids are face-to-face. And the one student that I'm there to consult to, we just keep setting them up with stuff. So we know what curriculum they have to teach. We give them electronic ways of teaching it. And then we do the sneak attack with, okay, now here's something new. And then I've got a good AT, well, no, she's not AT. She's like special ed coordinator who's very interested in things like modified curriculum and adapted materials. And so I've been teaching her so that it's not like I'm not spending, nights creating decks, Google decks and things. So she's been taking it over slowly. And I think because it's closer to them, it's not like this person from, 25 states away. That's been helping with them, and they're getting excited about it. And then they kind of learn new things that happen. This is a team that uses Microsoft Teams. So, what are the things that they're learning to do in Teams? And then there was a new teacher that knew some other things. And it's been kind of it started out really difficult in August, really rough.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's rolling.
No, I think that's awesome. We had some things in the chat, student testimonials, moving things from the idea of AT into more of a broad-based tech for all UDL approach to things. I was like showing successes. I mean, whenever I actually do prep a slide for this, that first one is always there. Like, what was a success from the past week? I mean, that's the way, is starting to show what in their mind, in the staff's mind, might not be big wins, but they really are. And trumpeting that a little bit, like, look, you guys did this. I have a school that I haven't been to since the pandemic started, but I'm doing these little like drop-ins with staff, and they're like, somebody just said it to me the other day, we're not trying to squeeze you out. I'm like, all right, I mean, I appreciate that, but that's fine, because ultimately I want to be squoze. I want to be squeezed out. I want you guys to do it, and you are doing it. So this is great. It's the whole point. I can find something to do. I'll sit in my office and moonwalk out the door. I'll find something. I can keep myself busy. So I think that's really important.
I would like to see the moonwalk on camera while it's being recorded before the hours end. Thank you very much.
Never going to happen. I am glued to my chair right now. I didn't even make the effort like I was going to do that. That is not happening. Add it to the grid. So
like
what else?
Share the data. If you can build that data in, so it's not something extra, and they can see it, it makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does. If the tool collects data, or if you develop that system of being able to collect it. And I like this idea again of almost like a sneak attack. We're collecting data when you don't even realize you're collecting data. It's even better. Or any of these little moments. When I was in the schools that I was consulting in, I would do that where I would collect those stories without telling anybody I was. Like, I would see people doing stuff and I would mark it down. And then at the end of the month, I would share tidbits of how they were using tech in the classroom. People didn't even realize that I had seen them doing that. And I was like, oh, I'll just kind of make a little note in my calendar. And I had this little, it would always be on the last day of the month. And it was a calendar entry, and it just had all notes in it. It's like, oh, I was in room blah, 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 and saw so-and-so doing this that we had talked about last month, and they're actually using it. And here's how they were using it. So those are always really good. Yeah. Like Jenna says, they don't even realize people are doing awesome things. They don't even realize it. And sometimes when you ask them what's something great you did, they don't have a way to even pull that out of their day-to-day experience. But if you're just that little bit separated from it, you'd be like, ooh, that's really cool. What's happening over here? And I think that's a good way to do it.
I have a team that I'm part of the mediation. Like, so I was thrust upon them, and, you know, nobody wants to have that. But we meet every month to go through our collaborative. And what I started doing back in October was, while I was observing, whether they were sending me videos or I was observing virtually live, I was doing screenshots of catching people doing things. Like, and so I'll have like, here's everybody in the classroom using visual strategies.
Right.
You know, here's everybody in the classroom modeling with the AAC device. And, you know, like that here's this little bit of proof
Right.
that people are. And then what it ended up is that slideshow started running the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So when there was something that I really needed to say, okay, we really need to step up modeling, or you have to watch because now you're giving kids direction with his own voice. You can sneak it in that way, and it doesn't seem like, you know, like she's yelling at us.
Right,
But
right, exactly.
I was glad that we got to that and got to that early, because August and September meetings were just like, I felt like I was always pouncing on them.
Yeah, right. And don't you think part of that is the development of the relationship, right? There is a shared understanding of each other. You know, you're not coming in as a gotcha, you're coming in to help. And you guys are doing things that are being done well. And I'm going to show that and support that in some way. And I think that really helps too, as you go through.
It also gave opportunities, visual opportunities for various administrators to see what was happening. You know, because just like we want to explain things to families and the educators, it's the administrators that also don't know what we're doing. Yeah. And so they need those moments of, oh, it took this many steps or this much time to get that one thing going.
Right.
So they realize what's happening.
Yeah. And then explaining to them that this little thing that's happening now will lead to this next little thing, which over time will become this very big thing. That is the success we are going for. And I think those are important too, to see those little building blocks.
And, you know, I really liked something that Chris Bouguet said. Don't tell him that, please. But no, he made a shift, and I've shared this before. I can't remember where he said this, but he said to turn. So thinking about Kelly saying, you feel like you're pouncing on them. And sometimes, you know, we don't want anyone to feel that way. So from changing the word from, I suggest that you can try this. And so instead of using the word suggest, he said, let's consider.
Yeah.
And ever since he said that, that has just opened my whole world, as far as, because I never wanted someone to feel like we're the ones coming in and we know it all, but we're not in the classroom every day with these specific students. So I always struggle with saying, why suggest? Because they're like, what do you suggest? And then, but saying, why don't we consider trying this? So then it's building up more as a team. And I love that he said that. And that was a few years ago. And that really resonated with me.
Yeah, I think it's really good. And oh my God, I'm going to give him a compliment too. So now he's going to really suck up this little moment of time in the video here. But we were planning a webinar we did for Closing the Gap last week, and we're doing another one. I don't know, maybe this week. I don't know. It's not
on like webinar crazy day, April 7th. There's like so much crap that day.
Sometime soon. I don't know. But we were talking about this idea of getting people involved. And we had this really deep discussion in our planning about the language you use. And we settled on these things called, you know, when we're asking people to participate in the webinar, whether in the chat or on some other platform that we're going to use, we are very specific about using the word invite. We invite you to participate. Accept this as your invitation to be part of the learning and the discussion. And I think it goes to that same thing that Kelly said, this idea of thinking about words we choose to use that are engaging to people and want them to be brought into this process. And, you know, and I think, and I don't know who said it, was it Joy that just said it in the chat about no longer putting recommendations on reports? Yeah, it's considerations or suggestions or something along that line. because I found over time, people were taking those recommendations and they were just doing all of them, even though 3 pieces in my recommendations might have been related to the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it really was meant to be, why don't we try this, and then let's discuss it. And then I realized, instead of putting that in recommendations kind of as a bulleted list, to be more specific in the language that says, I suggest we try these as a group, and then we come back together to discuss them, and then decide what the next step is. And all of these things together, and with that language of we and us, implying that I'm not going to just give you the answer, because you were there with that student all the time. So I could provide some suggestions. And I think that's really important. Because that's how we break down that expert model. Right? I mean, that's how we start to break that down, is that we are all experts in some way. And, you know, we all have information to share. You know, I talk with groups all the time about you all have knowledge about something. But are you keeping it siloed in your own space, in your own room, in your own class, whatever it is, and not sharing it with anybody else? Then no one else can be better because of that.
Yeah. And I think even taking it one step before that is that whole relationship building with the educators that you're working with. So I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, and just acknowledging, like, even saying, I'm not the expert. I know you're not, but just kind of calling the elephant out of the room, like just making them feel like they can open up and say, well, I'm really afraid to try this, because what if this doesn't work? So, excuse me. So it's sharing our failures, our successes, but recognizing that we understand how you feel, and constantly talking about just considerations and being a team, you know, together.
Yeah, and all those things are so important. I mean, over and over, it always comes back to, doesn't matter where it goes and the paths it all takes, it always comes back to that relationship building moment. And it really is all about that. I mean,
it is, because that's where, if you do a webinar, that's where you actually get genuine follow-up. Like, you're not saying, hey, how's it going? You're getting not bombarded, because it's a positive thing, emails and phone calls saying, hey, I was in your webinar and this, and this, because you're creating that safe space where they know that you're bigger than just being there for that hour. You know, like, there's actually legwork to be done, and they understand that, hey, I really think, like, Mike Murata's, I feel comfortable contacting him because I truly feel like he'll help me. And that is that relationship building, even on webinars.
Yeah.
Like, remember, Mike, you and I presented together. We spent like the first 5 or 10 minutes, well, before it even started. And that is creating those relationships. And it's helpful. It's helpful.
Yeah, the being on 10 minutes before and just chatting with people, asking them to just drop in where they're from and what's happening. That's why I'm really liking lately this idea of doing series of webinars versus kind of a one-off. If it has a theme and it goes across 2 sessions or even 3, because then you can, and the way I use that a lot of times is to challenge people at the very end of each one. Like, think about these things and how you're going to use it. And this is going to be the first thing we talk about in the next one. Like, there has to be some reflection. And I don't know if people are always consistently doing that, reflecting on their learning or the ways they might use this, unless you explicitly say it to people sometimes.
I think that's a great idea. There was a state that they were going to do a webinar series, but it got canceled for some reasons. But the first week, it was going to be in the fall. So the first week was actually the presentation. Then the second week coming back, those same attendees came back after they've been able to absorb what they were thinking with all of their questions and troubleshooting and kind of brainstorming together. And I love that model. Like, I was super excited about that. So what you're saying, I think, is, you know, a great thing to do. And maybe we all should be mindful just doing that. Like, when we do a webinar saying, well, next Wednesday, I'm just going to be here for Q&A or whatever, just hop on.
Yeah.
And if you are not, like, in what I have found, because I do a lot of my AAC training in series, and we've done it for a long time and then just converted over to virtual. But if you don't have an administrator on the ground with what Penny Reed calls the perceived that you will do this, that, you know, that then they just, you know, I have people that are so surprised when we come back and I say, okay, we left us here, you know, did you do a communication matrix? And so let's show it. And they're like, oh, we really had to do that? You're like, okay, well, where did I drop the ball in all of this? Because I thought they knew going in that these was a working series of webinars that we were going to meet over a couple months. But unless you have that administrator on the ground saying, this is what's expected, this is a part of our ongoing professional development, they're just coming to like, oh, it's a Zoom and I'll keep working while I listen to you. And yeah, it's got to come from both sides of it.
It does. But, and you know, and I think part of that, Kelly, is breaking people free from that perception of what learning should be. It's because that's what learning has been for them. And we're all just as guilty.
Active. It's been a passive act.
I'm just as guilty. I'll sign up for a webinar and I'll put it on and mute my mic and I'll turn my camera off and I'll go do something else in my office as it's playing. So I can be just as guilty of that. But if you put that out there to them right at the front and say, hey, this is a whole series of learning opportunities. Here's what they look like. And I'm doing one this afternoon for a group with Ocali that I'm working with. And we did a webinar 2 weeks ago. This is the Inbetween meeting where it's just coaching, check-in, reflection. I think I have 4 slides to keep the group moving. Yeah. But it's just going to be conversation. It's going to reflect back on what we did the first one, give us some kind of bridge activity, and then lead us into the next one. But these are really fun, and people are always panicked, kind of like, you know, with even with these town halls of not having a plan. Sometimes not having a plan is the best thing to do, because you can just kind of stuff. It's a chance to breathe a little bit, and you know, you can come up with ideas like Kelly's no shirts, no shirt, no shoes, no service webinar. She can have those moments of, oh, maybe I can do that. But I think those are really important, and reminding people that there is work to be done. I think it's interesting to do that in a webinar, though. It doesn't have the same effect as when you're in a live session and you just stare at people and wait for them to add in something. People in a webinar are perfectly comfortable to just stare at you the whole time and not say a word.
I am not comfortable with that, so I'm constantly filling in.
I don't know, that trick doesn't work as good on a webinar. They're just staring and waiting. The awkward silence, yeah, doesn't always work as good as you hope. Oh, that's funny. So other thoughts on these 2 topics? These were great topics, I say, from my little list of cards here. I will mark these as discussed, and I'm going to put it on the back so we don't talk about these again. Other things that people want to talk about. David, I see you got your whole team there. Does your team want to chime in on how to get buy-in from reluctant educators? Not to put you guys on the spot, but.
I think we find this a very appropriate subject for right now, because we're going through that. We're in the process of, we've made a website, and we've just come to the realization that there's probably a lot of people out there, whether they're teachers or whether they're other administrators in the district, that aren't looking at the website because they don't know what's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we spend a lot of time putting links into appropriate different kinds of materials, all the way from applications to switches. We've added all that. It's a simple click, but just to get them to recognize that the website is there is an issue.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so what kind of ideas have you guys come up with to get the word out a little bit? Ooh, the pressure. Ooh, this is that moment where everybody stares.
We have an instructional, what's your official title? Technology director.
Okay.
For the district. And so she's invited us to make this website and share that with her website. So at least we have that connection.
That's great. That's awesome. Right. Yeah. And then you magnify the views on it, which is perfect.
As we continue to work directly with teachers in buildings when we're asked to come out, when we've got a formal request or we've got an ongoing kind of consultation with the team. We continue to share some of these resources we have to kind of flex more into the capacity building and move away from us as the specialists. It's slow going. We have some teams that are doing it better than others, as you guys have already talked about. Sure. And it's really based on their understanding and comfort with assistive technology. And so we've spent a lot of time reinforcing that they really know a lot and are already doing a lot. They just don't realize it's AT. So let's at least talk about that first and recognize that, hey, you guys are already doing this. This is AT. Let's, remind ourselves. Exactly. And then if this isn't working, what can we add to it? So we kind of help do a little more of that coaching. So we're not necessarily dumping our opinion. Mm-hmm. But it's been a struggle. It's a work in progress.
Do you find that when you are doing your outreach that there's a lot of fellow educators who just aren't responsive at all and just kind of ignore your emails and just kind of,
And I think especially now because teachers are just so overwhelmed with anything new coming at them that they feel like we're trying to put more on them right now and we're not. We're just trying to highlight. You guys are kind of already doing a lot of this. You really are. Like let's just recognize that. Yeah. But they are overwhelmed, and you're right, Clay. They kind of are like, oh, I don't even want to touch that.
Yeah.
You know what? An interesting way you guys have. There's enough of you in your group that a way to get the word out a little bit more without kind of beating people over the head with it is maybe consider adding some links to your website or a little resource at the bottom of your email signatures every week. And each one of you take a different thing every week.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Like a did you know? Like, oh, here's my contact info. And then a did you know? Switches are really assistive tech. I don't know. You can use that for free. I'll give you that one for free. That one was pretty bad. But then it's a link back to your website and it's always there. I do that on one of my teams because at the bottom of my email signature for their district, it reminds them that I don't work in the district. I work only one day a week for them. And right underneath it says, if you have a question about AT, look here first. And it's a folder that we've created in district where it has a bunch of resources in it under different headings. And then it says, if it's not there, reach back out and we can work further on it. But at least it gives them a starting point. Because I've had people say, you know what, I started an email to you and then I saw your link in a previous email and I just went there instead. And I found what I was looking for. And so it even saved them that one reach out, which was great. It's the whole point.
Good idea. Thank you. We'll take that one.
Yes, we'll take that.
Cool. Happy to give it.
Is your website for just staff or is it for families or both?
At this point in time, it's just staff. And we started with Gen Ed, and now we're trying to get it onto our special ed website in the district, which is kind of ironic. But and then we'll have to have approval within our district, probably have to go to administration and lawyers to make sure we can then share it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And maybe it is a slightly different resource page that goes out to the parents, and maybe it's it's modified and curated. I'm always of the belief, and this gets me in trouble with administrators, that whatever I tell a teacher, I should be able to tell a parent too. What's the difference? And then I'm reminded that there apparently is a difference, but I don't believe that. I think I should be able to create one website and all the stakeholders should be able to see it. Which is exactly why in this one district, I do not have a web page on their website. They will not let me have one, and that's fine.
One success that I kind of worked with through, it was a middle school, and their IT team, their AT team, they would send out weekly things to try. And she was like, they're just not reading my emails. Like, I don't know what to do. So we kind of brainstormed, and she started sending out like a celebration of someone who actually used that and shared that success. So then that, it wasn't all about try this. It was like, look, when this teacher did this is amazing. So it was more celebrating that, kind of getting that circle to be bigger. So that was pretty great.
It is great. And it's kind of, it's getting them, it's kind of backhandedly getting them back to the website, right? You just keep pushing them back towards it, but the hook is a success. And it's one of your colleagues having a success, maybe with a student you even know.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that connection where people go, oh, all right, this isn't all complex and mysterious as assistive tech is often thought of. It is not.
Chocolate's always good too. Handing out chocolate.
Yeah. Straight on pandering. We're not opposed to that. I'm fine with that. It's okay.
Oh, I have done sessions where in the description, like, and there will be chocolate. I'm not above it.
I would argue in some places you lead with that. Lead with the chocolate, give them the information after that.
That's right.
Oh, that's great. All right, guys, we've hit the top of the hour. Last thoughts before I shut us down for another week? How much fun was this? Always fun. Always fun. I was so mad last week when I had a meeting come up and I wasn't able to come, and I was like, boy, that's really annoying. Starting work getting in the way again. But I was happy to be back this week. All right, guys.
Something else that's fun that has nothing to do with any of this at all. That will blow your mind. So you see my glasses that I have on?
Yeah.
I ordered these glasses, so they're prescription glasses, but watch what you can do. You can change them. They're these little magnetic frames that you can change it to all of these different styles. Is right, Rachel?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I ordered some Star Wars ones that are coming in.
Kelly, put the link in the box right now or text it to me.
Yeah, put the link in the box.
I mean, my Galaxy ones, I mean, all day.
I'm sporting my new Patton's blue glasses that were sent to me from signing up for but nothing like that. Are you kidding me?
How fun is that? Oh, it's called Pair Eyewear.
I love the fact that you had them all right there and you're just clipping them on one after another. There's something funny about that too, that you're just like.
Wait, what glasses did you get for going to Oh, I think it's because I'm out of state. I didn't get any.
Well, I was one of the first 100 to sign up, I think. So they sent me these little, and they showed up today, and I've been sporting them around. The blue filters, which I need after being on spring break for 2 weeks.
Yeah, right. Wow.
And now I have to stare at a screen again.
Who knew you'd get a little fashion discussion at the very end before I shut the recording off? Well worth it.
You're welcome. For any
this far, I'm happy for you that you got that.
They're life-changing.
They seem pretty fancy. I'm not Pair Eyewear. I'm going to look that up because I have 14 other things I should be doing right now, but that feels more important right now. So I'm going to do that first.
Yes, it really is. When I have my Star Wars ones on, you will be very jealous. So.
That's why I'm going to look. I'm going to see what they look like. All right, everyone. Now I got to go do some work.
Guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good week, everybody.